So we have so far seen 7 days of Browns camp, a full week of practice back from all of the craziness that this offseason has been. And I think we have seen some interesting things on all 3 facets of the ball for the Cleveland Browns. Some of those things are very positive. Some of those things are kind of intriguing. And some of those things just are a little bit concerning. So what are those things? How do I feel about them? And where is this team after the first week of training camp? Well, let's talk about it. Real quick before this video starts, please make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ding that notification bell. We got a lot of fun content coming out around Browns camp, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single thing. Also, the Fantasy Football League will be back. If you want to join that, make sure you join the Patreon. Link is always in the description. And once you join that Patreon, send me a message on Patreon and let me know that you did that and that you want to join the Fantasy Football League. I'll add your name to the list and you'll be sure to be in the Fantasy Football League this year. Join now because spots usually go pretty fast. Browns signed former Super Bowl MVP Malcolm Smith. Now, if anybody remembers watching that Super Bowl MVP performance happen with Malcolm Smith, it was like one of the more flukish kind of Super Bowl MVP performances in NFL history. So I say that with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, Malcolm Smith is a veteran linebacker, has had some productive years in the league outside of Seattle. The problem with Malcolm Smith is that he blew his quad, I believe, in 2017, hasn't really been the same player ever since. So that's kind of why Malcolm Smith's available at this point. Now, he could have a bounce back similar to a LJ Fort, similar to a Josh Bynes that for Baltimore last year and be that missing piece for this linebacker room. But at the end of the day, he's a veteran. You really lose nothing by bringing him in. This is a good move by the Browns. I like that they did it. Nothing to lose here, but not going to put too much stock into this signing because, again, Malcolm Smith, at this point of his career after the quad injury, hasn't been kind of that reliable veteran force in the linebacking room that you would expect. So this is more or less kind of a flyer situation when it comes to Malcolm Smith. It could turn into something. It could be somebody who's cut at the end of camp. It's really not that big of a deal either way at this point. If he really performs during camp, then it'll become a big deal. But right now, the signing, you know, it's a guy getting a flyer, a guy getting a tryout for the Browns, especially since, again, no Mack Wilson for at least a few weeks during the regular season, you would have to assume. So that's kind of the general stuff. So the defense has been interesting, right? Because overall, I would say they've looked good. Now, obviously, it's the first week of camp. And usually the rule is the defense is always ahead of the offense for a myriad of reasons. So no surprise here, even though the Browns offense has a ton more talent than the Browns defense. Now, where does this Browns defense specifically shine and where I think that's going to hold up during the regular season? The secondary is where I think the Browns are going to shine defensively during the season. And obviously, you have Myles Garrett. But let's talk about the secondary. You have Denzel Ward. You have Greedy Williams. You have Grant Delpit. And you have Andrew Sadeo. You also have Carl Joseph. You also have Terrence Mitchell. Hopefully, you'll get Kevin Johnson back. So that's 7 DBs. 7 DBs that not only are good, but I would argue are starting quality. And then you have the depth pieces like a Sheldrick Redwine, who's not the greatest free safety in the world, but a guy you can put out there if you need some extra DBs out there. You also got a guy like MJ Stewart who could step up and really help add some depth. You have a ton of versatility and you have a ton of depth. And then the potential is insane with this secondary unit, right? Grant Delpit was the best player in college football 2 years ago. He could step up and become one of those type of safeties that become a real problem in NFL. Greedy Williams has flashed his potential in previous years. He's been really good throughout camp to the point to where that even though Terrence Mitchell is having a extremely good camp against the twos, he's not really pressing Greedy Williams for that number 1 or number 2 spot on the defensive back room. So that's how good Greedy's been against the ones. Like, he's held his own against Jarvis. He's held his own against Odell when he's lined up against him. He has good length, good size. He was actually decent in run defense last year. So you add that versatility to a guy that wasn't supposed to have that versatility coming out of college. And then you got Denzel Ward, who, if he stays healthy, the way he's looking right now, will be a top-tier corner. there's so much depth, there's so much at the top of this, and then there's so much versatility, because if you do get Kevin Johnson back before the season, you have another big corner you can put at the slot. You also have the ability to have Grant Delpit move around and do different things in the defense, because you have Sadeo who can play free safety back there. You also have Redwine who can be out there. You have so many different looks that you could throw out there with your defensive backs that it kind of makes up for some of the question marks that you have in the linebacker room. And speaking of the linebackers have actually held up so far throughout camp. It's not the greatest unit in the world. They haven't been dominating by any stretch of the imagination, but they've held their own. BJ Goodson and Sione Takitaki are proving that at the very least they're going to hold up in run defense. I think they'll be fine there. I think you can kind of get them on play action and get them in the passing game, but that's why you have all these extra DBs to kind of help mask their inability to kind of cover a lot of ground in that area. So for what the Browns have, I think it kind of all matches together and it all fits. Now, again, I think a lot of this hinges on this defensive line's ability, mainly Myles Garrett, to get a ton of pressures this year. So hopefully that happens. But all in all, I have to say I feel pretty good about the defense. I actually feel better about the defense than I did coming in. That being said, I do have my concerns about the interior of this defensive line still, because there's no replacement for Andrew Billings, and it doesn't look like one's coming. They want Jordan Elliott in there. Jordan Elliott has impressed during camp, made some plays. It's just with defensive tackle and defensive line observations during camp, you kind of have to take them with a grain of salt, because the level of physicality with your own team is never going to be the same as it would be against a team that you don't play for. So that's going to be kind of hard to gauge throughout this entire situation. But no Billings replacement. Jordan Elliott, I don't love the fit there as a run stuffer. I think he's more of a pass rusher from that inside position, but we'll see what they do there. He is bigger than Larry Ogunjobi. And Larry Ogunjobi, when he's been out there, he's been fine, but he hasn't practiced that much. So still some concern there. And again, only 14 padded practices to kind of get things right and get the help you need in the middle. And I don't know if that's enough time to fix what I fear may plague this defense if certain things don't happen. But that's what we've learned about the defense. Let's talk about the offense. So any conversation about the Browns offense starts with the piece that kind of a lot of people see as the most pivotal in this whole collection of pieces that the Browns have. And that's Baker Mayfield. And how has Baker Mayfield look? Baker's been up and down. And when I say up and down, I think people kind of take it as the most extreme definition of up and down, as if I'm saying his highs are like, oh my God, amazing, and his lows have been like, oh my God, Nathan Peterman level bad. That's not the case. It's been up and down because the level of play hasn't been consistent, but the lows aren't really that low, I must say. Like, they're not like great lows, like they're not Patrick Mahomes lows, but they're pretty good starting quarterback lows here. Like, he'll have an interception here or there where he's forcing something. But again, that's what you want to see in practice, is the quarterback try to see what's going to work, try to see what their wide receivers can do in certain tough situations. So not going to glean too much out of that. He's taking a lot more checkdowns. The one thing that does concern me is that I noticed that sometimes if the first couple of reads aren't there for Baker Mayfield, so if 1 and 2 aren't there, he can start to look a little flustered. Now, that could just be learning the offense. That could just be growing pains. That could just be wide receivers not being where they need to be. But it happens. When Baker Mayfield's able to just take those steps, be in rhythm, and make that throw on time, on rhythm, he's one of the better quarterbacks in the AFC North. When he has to pat the ball a little bit, look around, try to see what he could do, that's when you get concerned about Baker Mayfield trying to do too much, or trying to make a play happen when it's not, or seeing something that's there that's really not there. And that's where I think it's either a combination of the limitations of Baker Mayfield, and it's also a combination of the limitations of where they're at with building this offense. They're not complete yet. There are things that just aren't done with this offense, and that's going to be the case somewhat at some level coming into the season. So that's just going to be something you're going to have to get around with the Browns, whether that's going to be running the football more, which, hey, if they want to do that, Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb have looked absolutely phenomenal. that's going to be great. If the Browns want to run the ball 40 times, they can legitimately do that. They can give each of these backs 20 carries, and they'll be fine offensively because that's how good they've looked. Kareem Hunt has looked like the guy who led the league in rushing in 2017, and Nick Chubb looks like Nick Chubb again. That's an insane combination to have. Two guys who are capable of leading the league in rushing yards in your backfield. I don't think people grasp how dominant that could be and how pivotal that's going to be for the Browns at the beginning portion of the season when people aren't going to be tackling as well and when offenses aren't going to be complete, period. Like, there's not going to be a single complete offense in the NFL. I don't care how long they've been doing it. 14 padded practices is not enough time for any NFL offense to be complete. So the Browns kind of have an edge there with the ability to run the ball, and I think that is going to be able to take advantage of some of the poor tackling we're going to see at the beginning of the season. It's going to be able to mask the offense for at least a month while they try to finish building this thing behind closed doors during the season. I think that's going to be a massive benefit. And again, these two look real. Like, if one of these two were your only running back, you feel really good about your running back room. The fact that both of them are on your team looking the way they do, this could be something very interesting come the start of the season and make building this offense and completing this offense really easy, much easier than it has any right to be. But back to Baker Mayfield, I think he's been fine. I think he's looked how you've wanted him to look, making some mistakes here and there, not looking the greatest here and there, but also having moments where you can see the potential with what he has. Now let's talk about some of his other pieces, and that's Odell and Jarvis. And I'm happy to report that not just Jarvis looking good, but Odell looks like Odell again. Like, he has that burst, he has that acceleration, and he can hit that fifth gear again that he wasn't able to all last season. And that's great to see from Odell Beckham Jr. Those two are going to be a huge part of what the Browns plan to do, but I think a part that's going to slip under the radar for most NFL fans who aren't really watching the Browns right now, that's going to be Austin Hooper. That's going to be Harrison Bryant. And that's going to be even somebody like Donovan Peoples-Jones, who might be able to do something with the small role that he has there. But the tight ends in this room have looked good. And you have so many strong skill position rooms on this team that are deep. You know, everybody knows the Browns have Odell and Jarvis in the wide receiver room. A lot has been made of that, but having guys like Rashard Higgins, having a guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones who's looked as good as he had, even a guy like Kadero Hodge who has been kind of a surprise of camp in that room, I mean, that's pretty deep. I think that's a really good room top to bottom for any NFL team, especially when you have those two pieces at the top. You talk about tight end rooms like David Njoku, who would start and be the number one tight end for a number of teams in the NFL, is a complete afterthought at this point because you have an Austin Hooper. You have somebody like a Harrison Bryant who all he's done throughout the first 7 days of camp has make plays. That's all he's done. He's just made play day after day, day in and day out. And it's kind of really refreshing to see. Even guys like Steven Carlson, Farrell Brown has looked decent in camp. That tight end room is deep. The offensive line, I think, is a lot deeper than people realize it to be right now. Like Wyatt Teller at right guard, that's questionable, but every offensive line has that kind of one questionable player who's in it. But Nick Harris, the backup center, he's looked fine while J.C. Treader hasn't been out there. Like, you haven't even noticed that J.C. Treader is not out there, which is a very good sign for the rookie right there. You have Jedrick Wills, obviously. You have Jack Conklin. You have Joe Bitonio. I already mentioned J.C. Treader. You also have Chris Hubbard, who you don't want as your starting right tackle for 16 games, but having him as your swing tackle / utility guy on the offensive line, that's a pretty good position to be in. Like, this offense is pretty deep across the board, and I think it's one of the deeper offenses in the NFL. Like, they can withstand a couple of hits here and there and be completely fine. And that's not even mentioning how deep they are at running back, which is ridiculous. Like, you could lose a starter from like 3 different position groups, and I don't think you missed that much of a step. And that's a pretty important thing to have, especially in the season that we're entering. Like, that is a really good thing for the Cleveland Browns. Now, can they get all this together? Can they get the offense put together in a timely manner or just enough of it put together to beat Baltimore? That remains to be answered. But what I will say is that if this team gets it together late and maybe they're 9-7 heading into the playoffs or 10-6 heading into the playoffs, that is a team you don't want to play. Like, I think the Browns at the end of the season is definitely not a team anybody wants to play. So if the Browns could be remotely put together by the start of this season, then it's just going to be so much easier for them come 2020. So that's one of the best things that you see about this offense is how deep they are. They need to be more consistent, but the vision, the mold of this offense is all there. So I think it's all in good shape. So my observation for the first 7 days of camp is that the Browns are where they need to be. The offense has its moments of brilliance, but also at times looks very sloppy, which you expected. And the defense is holding up so far at the beginning of camp. This is where the Browns need it to be. And this is a fine sign for the Browns. The fact there's not a lot of drama coming out, and the fact that nobody's complaining, the fact that everything seems to be pretty cohesive and building towards a singular goal and a singular type of offense and defense is a pretty positive sign. So I think right now, through the first 7 days of camp, Browns fans should be thumbs up, pretty happy with what they're seeing. I'm sure Odell and Baker aren't like blowing it up every single day, but hey, if they were doing that, you'd be more concerned about your secondary than anything. So it's kind of a good sign that these guys aren't just blowing it up every day, because you do have a good secondary. So that's my thoughts on what the Browns have done so far. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.